Bienvenidos! Today we're going to learn how to use flashcards to learn Spanish vocabulary. There are three main parts of this process: organizing our time, organizing our materials and information, and studying the flashcards. So the first part, organizing our time, is really important, and this is something that we need to do when we first get our vocabulary words. Now, you could be taking a class and you need to memorize vocabulary words for a class, or maybe you just have a goal to learn a certain amount of vocabulary over a period of time because you're trying to learn Spanish. Either way, it's really important to be organized with your time. I'm going to show you a calendar. So the first thing that you need to do is decide a deadline for learning your vocabulary. Maybe you're taking a class and your teacher gives you a vocab quiz every Friday. And that Friday after the quiz, she gives you a new set of words. So that means that from Friday to Friday, you have 7 days to learn your vocabulary. Now this is important because we need to divide and conquer here. We need to take our time and divide it up into chunks and divide our vocabulary up into chunks in order to learn it over a period of time. This is really difficult for most people because you're used to being able maybe to cram the night before, 2 nights before a test. But learning vocabulary is different. Your brain can only handle a certain amount at a time, small chunks. And if you try to memorize all 30 words the night before the test, it's just not going to happen. So plan ahead and divide out your time. So we have 7 days. And this could be our vocab list. We have 30 words on the list, 7 days to learn them. So we want to divide it out relatively evenly over those days so that we're learning a certain number of words per day. It's going to come out to 5 words per day. So if we learn 5 words per day, 30 words, 7 days, it's about a little over 4 words per day, but let's just say we're going to learn 5 words per day. Because if you learn only 4 a day, you won't meet your deadline. So you have to round up. If it's over a number, you have to round up the next number, 5 words per day. So if we learn 5 words per day, we're going to learn all 30 words by the deadline. So the important thing is to know that we have to do this throughout the day, every day, not just once a day, but 3 to 4 times a day we need to look at these words, because this is something that we want to be able to recall easily, because we don't want to have to go back and learn every set of 5 words every day. We want to know them at the end of that day. Know them. So 3 to 4 times a day, daily, we're going to study the words, and 5 words a day. And also every day we're going to go back and review some words, because when we get to the end of that 7 days, if we haven't gone back and looked at those 5 words from the first day we studied, we're probably not going to remember them. So we have to allow in our study time not only time to know the new words, but time to know the old vocabulary words as well. So structure your study session. Plan to spend 10 to 15 minutes learning your new words and 5 to 10 minutes remembering the old words and going back and reviewing. Now these could be words that are on the list that you're learning today, or if you already know all those, go back to the previous chapter and review, because you're going to see this vocabulary over and over and over again in Spanish. It builds. It's not like studying a chapter in a history class and you may never need to know that again for the rest of the semester. These vocabulary words, especially at the beginning levels in Spanish, you're going to see them over and over again. So it's important to go back and review those periodically. So 10 to 15 minutes. New words, 5 to 10 minutes review every session. So that means 3 to 4 times a day, this much time spread out throughout the day. Now, the next thing we need to do is organize our materials and information. Divide and conquer is the name of the game here again. We have our vocab list. And some instructors give out the list with the translation and some don't. What I did was I went ahead and translated these Spanish terms to English. And while I was doing that, I organized it. I color-coded the different vocabulary words depending on what type of word it was. So for all the nouns, I think the masculine nouns I made purple, the feminine nouns are pink. I did a different color for the verbs. So that was how, for me, this list made sense. So when you're looking up your definitions or just looking at your list as a whole, think about what makes sense to you. Your teacher may already have it organized in a certain way, but if that doesn't make sense to you, you can feel free to reorganize this. This is your list of words. You need to find the thing that makes sense to you that's going to help you categorize these words. Now, after you organize your words, what you're going to want to do is come up with a method of storing your vocabulary words once you put them on cards, because you're going to have new words and old words. And I'm going to show you some things you could do to store them. One of the things you could do is rubber band your flashcards together. A lot of people do this, and there's nothing wrong with this method. Depending on how many vocabulary words you're going to learn, this may or may not work for you. The one thing I don't like about the rubber banded method is there's probably not a good way for you to identify this stack of cards later. So when you're digging through and trying to find chapter 1 at the end of the semester because you want to review it, do you have it labeled? So I guess if you're going to do the rubber band method, maybe stick a card in there and just with a label on it that says chapter 1 or September or the date on it. Or you could even put, the chapter theme, like in the home or technology, whatever the theme of that chapter was. But be sure, I think, if you do this method, label your stack so that later when you go back and you're looking for it, you'll be able to easily find it. Paperclip, same thing. Put a label in there if you're going to paperclip your cards. Another way that you could organize is putting your vocabulary in envelopes. It's easy to write on. It keeps things from falling all over the place. It keeps everything together. Again, maybe put the theme of the chapter, a date, or the class. This is for Spanish 1. And then it's easier to store and find. And if you do that, you're going to have to write on the envelope with a marker. Or you could use Ziploc baggies. This is okay, but they're kind of slippery and hard to keep organized. And you're also going to have a Sharpie to write on, and it can get a little bit messy when you're trying to write on this baggie with a Sharpie. But that might work for you too, especially if you're concerned about the cards getting wet or damaged somehow. This might be a more secure method than the envelope method. But it's really important, if you're going to go to the trouble to make these cards, to keep them, because you're going to need to refer to them in the future. Now, the next thing you're going to need to do is identify your learning style. Because when you're making these cards, you need to know what kind of materials you're going to need based on how you plan to process this information. Now, all of us have a little bit, at least, of each type of learning style. We're all somewhat visual, kinesthetic, and auditory learners. But some of us have a propensity to learn better with one method than another. So a lot of people are visual learners. So if you're primarily a visual learner, then when you're gathering together your materials to make your flashcards, you might want to use colored cards. You might want to identify the different parts of speech by different colored cards. And you might want to use different colored pens. You might want to use pictures on your cards. You might want to lay the cards out in a grid when you're studying them. And this might help you get a better visual picture of your vocabulary. You might be able to picture it in your head when you're on the test. You're also going to want a dry erase board. If you're a visual learner, do the dry erase board, because that's going to help you visualize with those colored dry erase markers those words and those spellings. You might want to use a highlighter and highlight words or certain parts of words, the accent marks, or the ending of a verb, or the ending of a noun, if it's masculine or feminine. You might want to draw a box around the word, another visual cue. And you'll want to maybe circle with a colored pen or highlight different parts of the words. That's for visual learners. Now for kinesthetic learners, the more physically oriented learner, you can do pretty much all those visual things because a lot of those involve the physical sense of touch as well. But in addition to that, you'll want to consider the size of the card because having that card to touch may affect your ability to remember it because you're more of a tactile kinesthetic learner. You'll want to maybe have a larger card, something that you can hold that feels more physical in your hands. You'll want to use markers maybe because holding that larger marker and feeling it move on the paper or on the dry erase board is probably going to help you more. And you might want to draw pictures rather than just cutting pictures out of a magazine. You might want to actually draw the pictures yourself because that act of drawing engages muscles and it's actually going to help you remember the word better. You might want to act out a word or a verb and study with a partner because these all involve your physical body. Now for the auditory learner, you're going to want to definitely verbalize the Spanish words and maybe study with a partner. Even if you're studying by yourself, say those words in Spanish. And if you study with a partner, just talking back and forth about the vocabulary is going to help you. The next step is to study the flashcards. Now, a lot of people ask, well, should I use an online software package or an app for my phone to make flashcards, or should I use the index cards? And I'm going to show you some advantages and disadvantages of each. Either way, you have to go with what's going to work best for you. For the index cards, if you're going to use index cards, when you're making those cards, you're creating links in your brain that are helping hook that information in. Just the act of creating the card, of writing out the words. You're using visual, you're using kinesthetic. So the act of using index cards actually creates more links in your brain. If you do pictures, that creates links in your brain to help you remember the words. And that's something that you can do easily with index cards. You can group the cards easily into whatever groups you choose whenever you choose to. You have more visual tools available. You can draw a picture or a box around the word. You can circle the accent mark. You can use highlighters. You can use different colored pens or pencils or markers. And because you're using a card and you're physically holding each card in your hand, that creates more kinesthetic links as you're studying the cards. Now for some people, flashcards are going to be more convenient. Maybe you don't have a cell phone or your cell phone can't use the applications that have good flashcards. Maybe you're someplace a lot where you don't have access to your phone or to a computer. So the flashcards would be something that would be more convenient maybe for you to take different places and study throughout the day. Also, maybe the flashcards are easier to store. I don't know what your situation is with your cell phone, but maybe everything's full and you don't have room to put everything in there. So the convenience is a factor that's going to be personal to you depending on what's most convenient for you. One of the disadvantages of using handwritten flashcards is it takes more time to make them. But again, it's a disadvantage in a way, but it's also an advantage because while you're creating them, that time that you're spending is actually creating links in your brain to help you remember the words. Now for the cell phone apps, they are very convenient because if you have a cell phone, it's probably with you all the time and you look at that vocabulary whenever you choose. It's very quick also. You can type it in and it's done. But that quickness is a disadvantage because then you're not spending as much time creating that card. You're not generating as many links in your brain. So therefore, quick may not be the best. And also when you're creating them, you're not using as many muscles in your body. You don't have that physical sense of touch. Maybe not even the visual of actually writing. So not as many links are created when you're making those online flashcards. Also, depending on the application that you're using, can you group the cards the way that you want to or need to? Can you put pictures on them? Can you use different colors to color code the cards or the text on the cards? And you know, these trade-offs are things that you need to ask yourself. Is it worth it? It's quicker, it may be more convenient, but are you going to have to study longer, and are you going to even remember them as well because you didn't take the time or put forth that energy to create them on flashcards? When you're actually studying the cards, maybe there are fewer visual and kinesthetic cues to help you link into the vocabulary. So I think that there are a lot of advantages to using the index card flashcards, but maybe the cell phone app is going to work better for you simply because of the convenience. And if you have to make the handmade flashcards, you just won't do it. So it's up to you. It's your personal preference as to which method is going to work best for you. So after we've organized our information and organized our time, the next thing we need to do is make our cards and study them. The first thing we need to do is make our flashcards. Be sure you make the cards. Don't use the cards that came with your textbook necessarily, because those cards are going to have already been made and organized in a way that's not personalized to you. And when you actually make the cards yourself, you're creating links in your brain that's helping learn that vocabulary. So you want to make the cards yourself. And what you want to do is make enough cards at a time for one study session. So if you have 30 vocab words and you're learning 5 a day, just make 5 cards a day. Don't make any more than that, because then you're just wasting your time. You're just mechanically creating cards and not actually using that time to learn. So the act of creating your own cards only works if you do that in small chunks of however many cards you're going to sit down and actually practice at that study session. If you have to learn 21 words a day in 3 different sessions, then you're going to make 7 cards each session, not 21 cards in one day. You're only going to make enough cards for the one study session that you're going to try to learn in that study session of 5 to 15 minutes. Now, when people say they need to study the cards both ways, what that means is you're going to study the cards from English to Spanish and Spanish to English. Most people find that the Spanish to English is the easiest way and start with that way first. So what you'll do is make your 5 cards that you're going to learn today, or you're going to learn in this study session, and then you're going to shuffle them and read the Spanish word on one side and say it when you're reading it, and then say the English word. And if you miss one, then put it back in the stack and practice it again. You want to get it right 3 times before you count it that you actually know that word. So once you know the words from Spanish to English, looking at the Spanish and saying the English, then you're going to study the stack from English to Spanish. And a lot of people find this to be the most difficult thing to do. And because you're probably going to need to know how to spell these words, you'll want to have something to write on also when you're studying from English to Spanish. So you'll want a dry erase board, or you'll want to have a piece of paper and something to write on the paper. Because what you're going to do is you're going to look at the English word on the card, and you're going to say the Spanish word, and you're also going to write the Spanish word so that you can practice your spelling. And when you miss one, even if you just miss the accent mark or miss the O on the end and it should be an A, count it wrong and write it 3 times correctly. Because when you miss one, when you write it incorrectly, you've just practiced it wrong. And what you want to do is practice it right more times than you practice it wrong. So if you practice it wrong once, then practice it correctly 3 times. And that will help the correct way stick in your memory. So every time you miss a word, put it back in the stack and write it 3 times the correct way. Then the next time it comes up, if you miss it again, do the same thing again. And eventually you will have practiced correctly more than incorrectly, and that word will stick. Also, if you're having trouble with a particular word and you're trying, the learning style that you have selected, maybe try some of the other styles. So if you're a visual learner and you just can't get this one word to stick, try an auditory technique, or try a kinesthetic technique that we've listed. Because your body and your brain use all of those learning styles. It's just that if one particular word isn't sticking, maybe adding in some more links is going to help that. The more links that you can create with this vocabulary, the more likely it is you're going to be able to remember it, and the easier it'll be to remember. Let's see, if you're learning phrases, again, remember to divide and conquer. So a phrase is like a list of words. So don't try to learn a long phrase all at once. If it's difficult for you, then break it up and learn the first 2 or 3 words. Then add another word to it, and then just keep adding a word to it until you've learned the whole phrase. But if you try to learn the whole phrase at once, you probably will have trouble remembering and spelling it correctly. Okay, the other thing is when you want to challenge yourself a little bit further and make sure that you know these vocabulary words, if you can spell the words forward and backward, then you know that you know them.